Good evening, everyone. Esther Jane Scott, known as Nettie, was born on May 30th, 1875. As I tell a portion of her story tonight, I would like to make it very clear that all my information comes from W. Paul Reeve and the University of Utah's 100th Century of Black Mormons catalog, so check it out later. So back to Nettie. When she married Richard Kirchhoff, a German immigrant, on April 6, 1892, the county clerk listed her race as white. In 1895, the Wisconsin State Census and the 1900 United States Census also described her as white, but the 1905 Wisconsin Census listed Nettie as black, along with her two sons. The 1910 federal census was perhaps more precise when it described Nettie as mulatto. And in the 1930 and 1940 censuses, Nettie was again described as white. But whatever Nettie's racial identity, it was very clear that at least some people in the Latter-day Saint community and in the broader community in the United States at that time understood her to be something other than white. Northern States Mission President German Ellsworth specifically was one of those people. In 1909, he noted that there were 3 black families in the Northern States Mission and mentioned Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So sorry if I said that inaccurately. If any of you are from Wisconsin, please correct me afterwards. But in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, as home of one of those families, and he mentioned Nettie and her sons and her family. As mission president, he worried about the potential negative impression that the black families might leave on white investigators when they attended Sunday services, and found Mormons worshiping together in integrative congregations during an era of national segregation. Ellsworth perceived the presence of black members in the Latter-day Saint congregations as a disincentive to potential white converts, and as a result, he instructed his missionaries to stop proselyting in black neighborhoods. When I think about Nettie, and when I first read her story, I wondered what she endured throughout her life. Was she a lot like me? One white parent, one black, always caught in the middle between 2 cultures, 2 stereotypes. Did it take her a while to claim and love her own blackness? Did she struggle with her identity early on in life? The story of me coming to recognize my identity is a long one. And though I choose today to focus my words on my racial identity, I want to emphasize that it wasn't until I fully understood my identity as a daughter of God that I could begin to comprehend what it meant for me to be black. Both my mom and I distinctly remember an incident that took place when I was very young in kindergarten. As a family, we had just moved from Hawaii to Arizona, and the bullying I experienced at that tender age of 5 or 6 was core-shattering. One day I came home, I crawled into bed, and I cried hard. When my parents asked me what was wrong, I stammered out, "Mom, I wish I looked like you. I wish my skin looked like yours." You see, my mom is white. And in kindergarten, I had already made the connection that if I looked different, I would be treated differently. And my 6-year-old self longed for that. I longed for a sense of belonging. This longing carried me through high school and well into college. After Arizona, my family moved to a predominantly white city in Utah, and I was introduced to the subtle bullying art of microaggressions. My friends were unimpressed by my athletic skills. They disregarded my early morning workouts, my extra time spent on shooting and dribbling drills, my endless Saturdays spent in the gym. They said I was simply good at basketball because I was black. They assumed I could sing and dance because I'm black, and so they volunteered me to sing the national anthem for one of our games. If any of you heard me sing today, you would know what a horrible move that was for all involved. You would go deaf if you heard me sing. My white friend, whose dad was from South Africa, bragged about how she was more African than me, not recognizing that she was adding to my frustration and hurt, not realizing that no matter how African she wasn't the one getting pulled aside by teachers whenever slavery or the topic of racism came up. So I took my longing to be white, and I pretended that was my reality. I often wonder if Nettie was like that. Was she the one that listed her race as white in the censuses, similar to how I was putting white on all of my standardized tests? Did she learn from an early age that black was bad and white was good? Now remember that mission president I mentioned, President Ellsworth? If he found Nettie's race a problem, there was no indication that the other local leaders and branch members in Oshkosh did too. In fact, the opposite seemed true. The Kirchhoffs, by all indications, were pillars in the Oshkosh branch. Richard and Nettie were baptized and confirmed on the same day in September 1898. Nettie had given birth to her first son, Calvin, just 3 months before, and the young couple must have found a sense of purpose in their new faith. There were no branch organization in Oshkosh at the time of their baptism, and so it's unclear how they were able to nourish their faith apart from in their home. They would have had to wait another 6 years before the infant Latter-day Saint community in Oshkosh was organized into a branch. When that event took place on the 24th of July, 1904, Richard and Nettie were present as founding members, along with 2 missionaries. Each time the missionaries were transferred in and out of the small branch of Oshkosh, it necessitated a reorganization of the Sunday school leadership. Such reorganizations took place 5 times over the next 2 years, and throughout the resulting shuffling of positions, Nettie Kirchhoff remained a stabilizing force, a consistent leader through every change. She served as secretary to every reconfiguration of Sunday school leaders up through the final reorganization recorded. At that meeting, Nettie accepted her new assignment as assistant teacher of the theological class. The Oshkosh Sunday School thus became home not only to a mixed-gendered Sunday school presidency, but to a mixed-race presidency as well. It was no doubt Nettie's influence that also accounted for the fact that her sons, Calvin, Milton, and Leo, were listed among students among the students on the rolls of Sunday school at Oshkosh. In fact, the Kirchhoff family accounted for over 1/3 of the branch members included on the Oshkosh Sunday school rolls, excluding the missionaries. Speaking of the missionaries, one such elder, Elder James Grant, frequently wrote in his journal, and if his journal is any indication, the Kirchhoffs were among the favorites to the missionaries. Elder Grant served in Oshkosh from November 1903 through March 1904, and during that period, he mentions visiting the Kirchhoff family over 36 times. Grant's entry for the 23rd of January 1904 is typical. On that day, he wrote, "Went down to the Kirchhoff in the evening, sang songs, and talked gospel." 5 days later, he recorded, "In evening, we called on Brother and Sister Kirchhoff and spent the evening reading and talking on the gospel and came back to our room at 9 o'clock at that night, very cold." In February 1904, Grant and his companion held fast meeting at the Kirchhoff home and noted that most of them bore a testimony of the gospel, most of the members of the Kirchhoff family. Shortly after Grant arrived in Oshkosh, one of the Kirchhoff boys, little Milton, who would have been 2 years old at the time, fell sick. Grant noted that he and his companion, Albert Green, gave the boy several blessings and set up with their sick boy, including one night where Grant set up with him all night, and he seemed lots better in the morning. It's clear from Grant's journal that he developed a deep love and affection for the Kirchhoffs during his stay in Oshkosh. When he transferred to a different area, he went and bid Nettie and Richard and their family goodbye, and later met Brother and Sister Kirchhoff and others at a restaurant where the group enjoyed a farewell dinner together. Nettie died in 1942 at the age of 67 and is buried in Lakeview Memorial Park at Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Her grave marker includes the first verse of the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," as a moniker in her memory. Latter-day Saint records, when they list the death of both Nettie and Richard, indicate that they died in full fellowship. Nettie and her family demonstrated faith, strength, and perseverance throughout their lives and as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But how did they do it? how did Nettie remain a stabilizing force and a pillar of faith despite all of the trials that she faced during her life? Though I am not Nettie, and I don't know Nettie yet, I feel very connected to her. I see a part of myself in her story, and if I had to guess, I'm confident that her strength came from one guiding principle, which I will mention in a moment. First, I want to go back to something I alluded to earlier, that it took me a long time to know God and to know that he loved me. When I was 25, tragedy struck, and my anger at God flared. It flared to the point that I decided that God no longer needed to be a part of my life. He could go his way, I could go my way, we'd be Gucci. This went on for 2 years. Even as I refused to listen to him and refused to acknowledge him, though he was not in my plan, I was in his, and he was powerfully aware of me. And he intentionally put individuals in my life that lovingly, convincingly, and unbeknownst to me, invited me back to him. Though I had served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints years before, it wasn't until this time in my life that I finally developed a mutually respectful and charitable relationship with my God. I knew that he loved me, and I loved him. And this allowed me to better love others. And I think this holds a little bit of the key of what got Nettie through her hard times. Charity is the pure love of Christ, and it endureth forever. And whoso is found possessed of it at the last day, it shall be well with him. Nettie knew that God loved her. She loved God, and she loved her neighbor. And that was enough for her. I recently found out that I am pregnant with a baby girl. Thanks, Lita. No need to applause. I've recently learned that pregnancy is not a reason for congratulations. But thank you. Hopefully someday it will be. She will be able to see herself in Nettie just as I see myself in Nettie. And my greatest hope for her is that she will know how much God loves her. This is what legacy means to me. We all carry the burdens and the hardships and the trials and the frustrations and the anger and the hurt of our past and of past ancestors. We also carry generations upon generations of hope and love. If we are willing to let that be our guiding force, that hope and that love, we will discover that we too can be stabilizing forces, pillars of light. That is the future I see for my daughter, and the future I choose to create for myself. Thank you.